Hello my friends, in the previous video I introduced you to the popover attribute and I also promised to talk about the accessibility of popovers in another video, and this is what's happening now. In the previous video we learned that we can create popovers by using the popover attribute and by referencing it using the popover target attribute. Now, before I talk about the accessibility that we get from popovers, let's see what we are working with if we are not using a popover attribute. So, which information do we get from a button and a div? In order to understand that or to learn that, we have to look at the accessibility tree. And you can do that in Chrome DevTools, and you can also do it in Firefox. I'm working right now with Chrome DevTools. And if you open DevTools and you find your styles panel, in the same row, you can also select accessibility. And here at the very top where it says accessibility tree, there is a checkbox that says enable full page accessibility tree. And if you click that, you have to reload DevTools, and this will give you a new button here in the elements panel that says switch to accessibility tree view. And this button allows you to switch from the DOM tree to the accessibility tree. Now, if we press that, we can see all the information relevant for accessibility. So if we switch back, you see this is the DOM tree, and by clicking the button, we get the accessibility tree. And yeah, here we see there is a button, which is cool, okay. And on the right-hand side in the accessibility panel that we opened earlier, we see a couple of properties that this button has. So we see the accessible name, which is HTML. We also see the role button, and it's focusable. All right, fine. So there is no specific state or anything. It's just a regular button. If we look at the div, we can see that the role is generic. That's a default role of a div, so nothing special, just a generic element. So this is what we get by default. Now, if we put the popover attribute on our div and we reference it on the button, here's the information that we get now. So I select the button, and you can now see that the button has a new property, which is expanded, and it's set to false. So this tells us that the element that the button controls is collapsed or not expanded. This is the same as setting aria expanded to false explicitly. You don't have to do that with popovers, you get it implicitly. And we also see that there is no div, and this is because it's hidden. It's display none, so it's not in the accessibility tree. But if I click the div and we switch back to the DOM tree and then back to the accessibility tree, you can now see that there is where is it? Let me select the div. Now you can see that we actually get an element again. So now it's included in the accessibility tree because it's not hidden anymore. And one thing has changed. It doesn't have a generic role anymore, but a group role. So those are the two things that we get from popovers: an implicit aria expanded role and a group role. Now, if you're wondering what the group role is, you can look it up in the specification. There it says it's a set of user interface objects or elements that are not intended to be included in a page summary. So it's basically a group of elements that belong together, but they're not as important as a region, for example. So a not so important basic grouping. I've never used it in my HTML, or at least not in aria, because there is an element in HTML that creates a group, which is the field set element. So if you use a field set element, you get an implicit group role. All right, but this is the default. You can change it. So if you want to change this to, I don't know, a menu or a dialog, you can just use role on the div and change it. Nice. Now, let's look at keyboard accessibility. This is the second thing. If we use a keyboard here and I focus the first button and I press tab again, you can see how it jumps from the first to the second button. I go back to the first button, I press enter, the pop-up shows up, and now in my pop-up I have focusable elements. If I press tab, the focus doesn't jump to the second button, but it jumps to the first focusable item in my popover, then to the second, and only then when I leave the last focusable element in my popover, it jumps to the second button. And that makes absolutely sense. And you are probably thinking, well, it's because of the DOM order, right? So if you look at the DOM order here, you can see that first we have our first button, which is followed by the popover, the first popover. Then we have our second button, which is followed by the second popover. So basically, focus order is just following DOM order. Well, kind of. If you look at this example, you can see that I've changed the order. So we now have the first button followed by the second button, then we have the first popover, and then the second popover. If I now use the keyboard and I focus the first button, I open the popover, I press tab, you can see how focus still jumps into the popover. And this is by design. So it doesn't matter if the popover is following the button in the DOM or not, it will always jump into the popover if you're using the tab key. If you're using a virtual cursor in a screen reader, it will still follow DOM order. So this is good to know. So it's probably better if your popover is close to the trigger or follows it directly in the DOM. But if it's not, it's still keyboard accessible, which is a cool thing. So if our popover doesn't follow our button directly, we can still focus it. And we get another thing, another feature. If we inspect our button and we look at the accessibility tree and at the properties, you will see there is a new property. It says details. So it says that there are details for this button in the popover element. And what the details what details is it's basically the aria-details property. And in the spec, it says that aria-details identifies the element that provides a detailed extended description for the object. So when you put aria-details, it's not the same as aria-described by, where you get a description, but it just says, you know what, there is a detailed description for this element. And then it depends on the assistive technology how you can obtain this information. For example, in NVDA, if you press NVDA plus D, I think is a shortcut, it will read the text in the referenced element. So it will read the text from the popover. In JAWS, if you use the shortcut there, I forgot it, I think it's Alt Insert D, but I'm not sure. If you use the shortcut, it will jump to the referenced element. So it really depends on the software you're using, but it creates this connection to the element so that even though if the DOM order isn't right, screen reader users can still quickly get that information. As of now, it's not supported in VoiceOver, or at least I haven't found a way to get the details information in VoiceOver. All right, so we have implicit attributes and properties. We have keyboard accessibility, and there is maybe just one more thing that I want to show you. I said that you can change the role if you want to of your popover. So by default, we have the group role, but you can change it to anything you want. And yeah, if we change it to a dialogue, for example, it's fine. Then you just have a dialogue element. It's cool. You probably want to label it. So I would do aria labeled by here, button pop over HTML. So I'm referencing an ID, which I have to create. So now we have a button that controls a dialog which is labeled HTML. And if you use the keyboard, you can see how the popover opens, and that's it. You can do that, or you can use the dialog element actually. Then you don't have to use the role dialog. You still have to label it. And it's from an aria perspective, it's the same. You get the same role, but the behavior is different because there is stuff that the browser builds into dialogues, right? And it's evident when you use the keyboard. So if you focus the button, you press enter, you will see how focus jumps directly into the dialogue, but because that's what the dialogue element does for you. Yes, and that's it. I think I have covered everything that the popover attribute gives us, and it's just really cool that we don't have to set aria expanded explicitly. It toggles it for us. The same goes for aria-details, and also like what they did in terms of keyboard accessibility. That's really great. If I find anything else, I will do another video. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy what you see, then please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, comment, give feedback, suggest new topics, and of course, share my videos. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.